Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is the 6th of February and I finished 2 books a couple of days ago, but it's taken me a couple of days to film this clip. Firstly because life is very busy right now, work is crazy busy, but also it's taken me a couple of days to kind of settle into my thoughts on both books, so I just wanted to take a bit of time before I filmed this clip. I also, before I get into the books I've read, I just wanted to talk to you guys a bit about these wrap-ups because I've been doing them kind of vlog style since last summer. I think August was the first one I did. And I film it this way for 2 reasons. Firstly, because I feel like you get more of an in-depth review for me, or like a true review for me if I do it as I go along, because I typically read around about 10 books a month, but sometimes I've read like 19 books in a month. So by the time I sit down to do a wrap up like 4 or 5 weeks later, I can't really remember my feelings on the books I read at the start. So I started doing it this way so that I could document my like live reaction immediately after finishing a book, or a day or so later in this case. But I'm wondering if it's working for you guys, if you like it. I mean, it's easier for me because I can film as I go rather than having to dedicate time to sit down and actually do a whole wrap up in one go. But would you guys prefer if I did sit down wrap ups? I'm having a bit of a wobble about my content, which I think happens to everybody eventually. And yeah, I'm not sure if this is working or not, so please leave me a comment and let me know which you prefer. I'm happy to do either. If I can work out how, and let's face it, my technical capabilities aren't great, but if I can work out how, I will put a poll up here so that you guys can vote. I did put a poll up on Twitter and then the Twitter polls crashed, and it was just, I kind of took it as a sign to give up for now. So yeah, let me have your thoughts on the way I do my wrap-ups, because that'd be really helpful for me, so I can work out what I'm doing. Anyway, on to the actual books that I finished in the last couple of days. The first one was an audiobook which I listened to on Scribed, and that was Over the Top by Jonathan Van Ness. He is one of the, are they called hosts? I think they're hosts on Queer Eye on Netflix, which is one of my favourite programmes ever. It's a programme, in case you've been living under a rock, it's basically a makeover programme for people that are struggling, but it's not just a makeover programme. And they very much look at like the person's whole life and try and help out with whatever issues that person's having, and I just adore it. It's one of those programs that I never binge watch the whole series in one go when it comes out because it's always too short. I always try and save them for when I'm having a bit of a pants like mental health day, because they're just like so pure and they soothe my soul. And Jonathan is one of the hosts on that. He is in charge of grooming, and I'm not going to pick my favourite Queer Eye guy because I'm absolutely not doing that. But he's just got such a presence and so much energy, and he's so positive, and I just want to like hug him all the time, but that's weird. Anyway, Over the Top is his autobiography, which is narrated by him as well on Scribed. And I have some mixed feelings on this, which is why it's taken me a few days to film this clip. So it's one of those books that I wanted to love and I wanted to give 5 stars just because it's Jonathan Van Ness, and because he seems like such a wonderful person. Side note, Jonathan is non-binary, but he said a few times that he prefers he, him pronouns, so that's what I'm going to use in this video. Obviously that could change in the future, but at the time of filming this clip, that's what he said is his preference, so that's what I'm going to use. Yeah, so I had some mixed feelings. On the upside, it is raw, it's incredibly honest. He doesn't shy away from showing us the dark sides of his personality and the dark things that he's done and that have happened to him, which I really appreciated, because that must be really, really hard to put yourself out there and like literally lay yourself completely bare. So I definitely applaud him for that. I also love that he narrated the audiobook, because then you get, like any memoir or autobiography, it's always better when the author narrates it, a bit like when I listened to Michelle Obama's Becoming over the summer, because you hear it. Obviously it's their words and their voice, so it's exactly how they want you to hear it, and it's like they're talking directly to you and telling you their story. So I was really glad that he narrated it, and it's really funny, and he does a lot of like funny little asides, which I'm not sure if they're in the actual published book because I haven't seen that, I haven't got a physical copy, but that really made me smile. Like I said, he is brutally honest. It did make me cry a couple of times, because it's just difficult not to react to such searing honesty. The downside with this is, whilst he is amazing and he's very talented and clever. What he definitely is not as a writer, and that does show in the writing. And as someone who needs good writing in a book, that did bug me a little bit. And there were some things that he was talking about that felt really like rushed over. I sort of wanted him to slow down a bit, and yeah, just the writing was lacking in some places, which is not his fault because he's not a writer and he's not claiming to be, but just be aware of that if you're going to pick this up. I also need to give trigger warnings for sexual abuse and bullying, mental health issues, death of a loved one, also sexual addiction and recovery. So it's most definitely an adult book, and just be aware of those things going in, because there are some quite heavy topics. I gave it a 4 out of 5 in the end. I think if I'd read it physically it probably would have been 3, but just listening to him narrate the audio, like, you can't fail to love it. So yeah, that was a 4 out of 5 for me. And then the other book that I finished a couple of days ago is The Deathless Girls by Kiran. I think I've said that right. Kiran Millwood Hargrave. So this was my Secret Santa gift from Desi for Christmas, obviously. And I still can't remember why this was on my TBR and my wish list. But it's not really a retelling of Dracula. It's like a reimagining or like a prequel for The Brides of Dracula. So following a pair of sisters, they are travellers, and they basically, the book opens with them being captured by people they call the Settled and being dragged off to this castle, and it goes from there. I, again, really wanted to love this book. Also, look how pretty it is. It's so pretty, and it's got like the really nice end pages and like illustrations and stuff. But I just didn't love it, and I've been trying to work out why, and I think it's because it felt rushed, and I can't be dealing with books that are rushed. It felt like, because it's only 300 something pages, usually I want books to be shorter. I wanted this to be like twice as long so we could really slow down and get into it. It also felt like it ended just as the story was starting. It felt like a really long prologue, and there were flashes of brilliance in it that made me want to love it. There's a really lovely female-female romance in this, and there were some creepy bits, but ultimately I just did not connect, and it just all felt really rushed. It's also got a trope I really dislike, which is where the main character is in the shadow of a more successful or more beautiful or brilliant sibling or friend, and they're like the shy mouse, and I'm kind of over that trope. So yeah, I'm really sad that I didn't love this, because it means I can't keep it, even though it's really pretty and it would look really, really nice over there on my bookshelf, but I'm having to be strict with myself. So this will do the rounds with my friends and family, and then I will probably take it to the book barn. But yeah, I'm really disappointed in that one. So that was a 3. So yeah, that's the reading update for today. And like I said, please leave me a comment and let me know what you think about the way I do this wrap up. And I'll see you with the next book in about 10 seconds. It's the 8th of February, and I have done something in the last 24 hours I've not done for months and months, and that is I went and bought a book, started it last night, and I've just finished it. And I haven't read a book, like bought and read a book in 24 hours for so long, but this book was one that I just could not wait to get my hands on, and that is The Alibi Girl by C.J. Skuse. I loved it. So C.J. Skuse also wrote Sweet Pea, which is one of my favourite books of last year, along with the sequel In Bloom. They are very, very dark but funny thrillers. They've been basically described as Bridget Jones meets American Psycho, which is correct. This is her next adult book. She's written some YA books, which I'm not interested in, so I'm not going to be reading those, but I will read anything that she writes for adults. So this was the next book that's come out. It's not connected, it's not in the Sweet Pea series, although she has mentioned on Twitter that she's writing the 3rd book, and I am so excited for that book, even though she's not even written it yet. Anyway, this is her next one. We follow a girl who we know as Joanne, but we know straight away that she is lying to everybody around her. On the front it says her lies can't last forever, and basically we know that her whole life is fake. Her name is fake, or her variety of names are fake, her hair is fake, the cats that she lives with aren't even hers, and it's basically working out what's going on with her. It is marketed as a thriller. I don't think it's a thriller, I think it's more of a mystery. This is different to Sweet Pea in that the tone is quite different. And actually I really liked that. Sweet Pea is quite brash, it's quite offensive, it's very rude, and it's very dark and just kind of twisted. This is not. This has got a far gentler tone, so if you didn't like the crassness of Sweet Pea, I would recommend that you pick this up because C.J. Skuse's writing is brilliant. This is kind of more of a character study almost of this woman and why she is like she is and how she got there, and that's kind of the mystery really. So I don't want to say too much because obviously I don't want to give spoilers, but I read it, I could easily have read it in one sitting, but I didn't get it until I got home after work last night, and then obviously had to do some adult life stuff today, but I've just absolutely smashed through it this afternoon, and 5 stars. Another book is going to have to go a really long way to beat this as my favourite for the month, and I would highly, highly recommend it. It's the 12th of February and I've actually got you on the tripod in my bookshelf, which is usually behind me in Booktube videos because, you know, trying to give a bit of variety to the video. Anyway, it's 12th of February and last night I finished Surfacing by Margaret Atwood, which is the second book for the What the Book Club read book club. We are rereading Margaret Atwood in publication order. This was the second book. When did you come out? 1970 something? 1972. So, of the first 4 books that I've already done a TBR for, which I'll leave up here, I've read all 4 previously and they're rereads. This one I couldn't remember anything about, and now that I've reread it, I remember why. It genuinely like pains me to say it. I didn't enjoy this book. Yeah, and I feel kind of bad that I've made other people read it this month. I've already seen a couple of reviews. We've had a couple of people who have loved it, which is slightly soothing my soul. But the general feeling at the moment is it's not the best of Atwood's. It is only her second book, so, you know, we'll let her off. But yeah, it's very short. It's only 250 pages. We are following an unnamed protagonist as she basically goes back to her childhood home because her father has disappeared, and she goes with her boyfriend and also 2 of their friends who are in a relationship, and it's pretty weird. On the upside, there is some beautiful descriptions of nature. Atwood is just so fantastic at nature writing and bringing things to life. There's some really vivid descriptions. The narrator's father lives basically in a really wild part of Canada, and he lives on this like secluded island that's surrounded by other like tiny islands, and there's a lot, as you can see from the cover, there's a lot of them like on the water in canoes fishing and all that kind of stuff, and there's some really beautiful vivid descriptions of that. In terms of plot, there's really not a lot going on, and it does slide into the surreal, much like The Edible Woman did last month, and this is definitely a phase of Atwood's writing that I don't love as much as what comes later. Like, I'm kind of excited to get through this one, and then we've got, I'm gonna look at my Atwood pile, what's the next one? Lady Oracle. Lady Oracle's really fun, which is the book for March, and then we've also got Life Before Man, which is sort of a from what I remember, it's quite similar to The Edible Woman. It's more about like relationships and female choices. So this was one that I knew I wasn't gonna love, and I didn't. So yeah, it's pretty weird, but I am glad I've read it because I feel like the whole point of this project is to properly understand Atwood's writing journey, and to do that I feel like I have to read all of them in order to see the progression and see how she's wound up as the author she is today. So yeah, this was obviously worth reading for the project. I didn't love it. I've given it 3 stars, so I also didn't hate it. It wasn't like offensive or really boring. It was just slow. There wasn't a lot going on. It's not my favourite kind of writing to read, but it's done. I've given it 3 stars, and I'm interested to see what everyone else makes of it. It's the 14th of February, so happy Valentine's Day if that's something that you celebrate. I finished a book a couple of days ago, but it's taken me a couple of days to kind of get my thoughts together on it. The book is Dead Girls Surviving an American Obsession by Alice Bolin. I saw Harriet talking about it in one of her like recent reads videos, or I think maybe it was a video she was talking about books that she wants to read that she's bought recently, and it sounded really interesting, and it's on Scribe, so I grabbed it and read it. So it's non-fiction. It's a collection of essays written by Alice Bolin, in which the premise of the book is that she's exploring the true crime obsession of the dead girl, and what that kind of represents in terms of kind of the American psyche. And I picked it up because that's what I was really interested in, but it's actually not quite what it says it's going to be. A lot of it is quite autobiographical, from Alice Boleyn, so we get a lot of like where she was when she was writing these essays and what she was doing with her life at the time. And to be honest, I got a bit bored, and I don't feel like it brings anything new to the party. I think if it's something you've never thought about before or read before, then maybe it would be a good one to kind of read a couple of the essays. But I felt like it was really repetitive. I've read better written stuff like this before, and yeah, it didn't do it for me at all. And I did zone out of the audiobook a couple of times and had to like go back and re-listen. It was a bit of a slog. So I've given it 2 out of 5 stars. I just don't think it was for me. But if you think that's a topic that might interest you and you've not read about it before, then maybe give it a go. But yeah, for me, it was a bit of a dud. It is the 16th of February, and because of Storm Dennis, Gary and I had to cancel all of our plans for the weekend, so we just had a super like cozy weekend. It's actually been really nice, just chilling out at home. So apologies if you can hear like wind and rain, it's going nuts outside. Yeah, and we've just been kind of chilling out, did a bit of like adult life stuff yesterday, and other than that we've just been reading and watching Netflix. It's been really good. I've had like a really nice chilled weekend that I desperately needed because the last few weeks have been super busy. But I got 2 books to talk to you about because I finished 2 books in the last 24 hours, 2 very different books. The first was my library pick for the month, which is Women Talking by Miriam Toews, hoping I'm saying that right, or Toews, something like that. One of my intentions for this year was to randomly choose 1 book a month from the library. This was the pick for this month, which is why it's got this like super shiny plastic cover on it, so we'll try and hold it that way so it doesn't glare. So this is a book I've heard loads about, loads of people talking about it. Harriet gave it 5 stars. It's quite a polarising book, I think, because a couple of my other friends, my friend Jill, who runs a bookstagram called Books and Jill, I will put her link in the description because I love her bookstagram channel. Jill Reads, that's her handle, so I'll put her link below. Gave it 1 star. So it's based on true events, where in between 2005 and 2009, in a Mennonite colony in America, women and children were being drugged and attacked in the night. And to start with, some of the men of the colony and the elders were saying that it was the devil, or that they were imagining it, or whatever. And then one night, one of the women stayed up and she caught one of the men of the colony climbing in through a window with horse anaesthetic, and he was basically planning to drug and rape, I think, her daughter. And this caused obviously massive outcry within the women of the community. At first it was very much played down by the village elders, and then one of the women attacked one of the rapists, at which point the village elders called in the police. First time ever they'd called in outsiders into the colony, and the men were taken away to be tried. And this is a fictionalised account of a meeting in which the women discuss what they should do. And they've basically got 3 options. They can either stay and do nothing and forgive the men that have done these horrific things, or they can stay and they can fight the men, or they can leave. And it's literally just their conversation. We get the perspective of the man who was taking the minutes for their conversation, who has not been involved in the attacks and is an outsider in the colony for reasons that become apparent through the book. And I've really struggled with my rating for it. I've given it 3 out of 5 stars in the end. It's tricky because there are so many insightful and important things that are said in this book, and discussions around the women sort of realising that they are treated actually worse than the animals that live on the colony and in the community. But I just found it really dull. And I feel bad saying that because obviously it's based on true events, although I don't even think it's own voices as far as I'm aware. But it's only 220 pages, so it's really short, and it took what felt like forever to read. So I did finish it because I was really interested in what it had to say, but for me, I didn't love it, and I could only give it 3 stars. Next up is a very different book, which I have read in less than 24 hours, and that is Dark Matter by Brett Blake Crouch. This is the group book for the current round of Thriller-a-thon, which is happening as I'm talking. By the time you see this video, it'll be done. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. I've given it 4 stars. It's really hard to talk about without spoiling. So all I can tell you is basically a man gets attacked one night on his way home. He is asked by a stranger if he loves his life. He's then injected, and then when he wakes up, he's strapped to a bed, and that's probably all I can tell you about it. It is one of the weirdest things I've ever read. There's a lot of kind of science stuff in this. There's a lot of discussion around metaphorical physics, I think, or metaphysics, and you kind of have to like suspend disbelief, put that over there, and basically just strap yourself in and hold on for the ride. I thought it was really well written. It's a thriller, it's a mystery, it's sci-fi, it's also a love story. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's my first Blake Crouch. I'm not sure, if I'm being honest, I'm not sure if I'd read any more. I'm not quite sure if it's my kind of thing. But I did really enjoy it, so yeah, I'd definitely give it 4 stars. I flew through it. I can see why it was picked for the Thriller-a-thon group book, because it's definitely a different part of that genre, which is fab. And yeah, I would really recommend it if you're looking for something weird and twisty. And even up until the last like dozen pages, I still didn't know where it was going. So yeah, very much enjoyed that. So thank you, Harriet and Emma, for picking that as the group book. It was fab. It's the 19th of February, and yesterday I finished my second read for Thriller-a-thon, which was Anatomy of a Scandal by Sarah Vaughan. Excuse me, it's clearly early in the morning. I listened to this on audiobook and thoroughly enjoyed it. I've seen a couple of my friends read it. Nicole's read it from A Beautiful Chaos of Books, but also my friend Catherine from KE Reads, who I will link in the description, but I don't think she's making YouTube videos anymore, which makes me sad because I loved her Booktube videos. But I'll link her anyway, because if her channel's still live, it's definitely worth going back and checking out her old videos. She read this, I think, last year, and I saw a review from her where she like absolutely raved about how much she loved it. So it's been on my like casual TBR list for a while, and then when I was looking for an audiobook for Thriller-a-thon, I saw that this was on Scribed, and it's not very long, it's about 9 hours, and I was like, yep, that'll do, that'll keep me going for a week or so. So I picked it up. So in theory, it's got loads of things that I don't really enjoy in thrillers. It's a domestic thriller, which is usually a phrase that like puts me off a book, because I've read some really bad ones. And it's also like rich people doing awful things to each other, but this book goes against the grain of that because it's got so much heart to it. We are basically following, we've got multiple perspectives, we've got 4 or 5 different perspectives, but basically a politician is accused of raping a colleague, and it kind of goes from there. We get his wife's perspective, we get his perspective occasionally, we get the perspective of the barrister who's prosecuting him, and it also goes back into the politician's history and when he was at university and things that went on there. He was at Oxford University, and it's sort of about the very murky world of politics. It's about privilege, massive trigger warnings for rape and sexual assault because it's discussed in detail and repeatedly throughout the book. So it's not like it's only like in one bit, it's all the way through the book. It's kind of woven through. We're moving back in time, back and forth in time constantly. We go through the trial, and it's all about the kind of the ramifications of what's happened on the various people that are connected to it. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was handled really well. There's a lot of discussion around consent and what that means, and yeah, I thought it was really well done. I've given it 4 stars rather than 5, only because the pace was a little bit baggy in places, and because we get different people's perspectives, there is quite a bit of repetition. But there were some very clever twists and turns, some of which I saw, some of which I didn't. I really liked the way it was like the end of it was handled, and yeah, I would really recommend it for sure. And I would also really recommend the audiobook. It's got a full cast, various different voices for the different characters, and yeah, I would really recommend that as well. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars. Thriller-a-thon is going very well for me. I've got one more book to finish, which will hopefully be the next clip if it all goes to plan. But for now, I've got to go to work. It's the 20th of February and I've just finished, well, last night I finished my third read for Thrillathon, which was All the Rage by Cara Hunter. My lovely friend Nicole, oh, there goes the cat. My lovely friend Nicole from Beautiful Castle Books very kindly sent me this ARC because she was sent an ARC and a finished copy by the publishers. So she passed this on to me because she knew I'd like it. It's a police procedural in which a girl gets attacked but survives, and then another girl disappears in the same way, and the police are basically trying to work out what's going on. It's part of the D.I. Adam Fawley series. It's book 4. I've not read any of the others, and I didn't realise it was part of a series before I picked it up, although a very kind viewer commented on my TBR for Thrillathon and said, oh, it's number 4 in a series, which was helpful because I think if I hadn't known that I would have been even more lost than I was. I've given it a 3 out of 5. I enjoyed it. It's well paced. I'm not quite sure I get all the hype, and I don't know if it's because I don't know the characters, and maybe I need to go back and start at the beginning. And I did, like I said, I did enjoy the writing, so if I found others, if I found the first one, then I would pick it up and read it. It's also got some like really interesting like mixed media, so some of it's in like court transcripts like that. There's bits that are in like text message or Twitter chats, and I really liked that, like there. So that was really interesting, but it didn't grip me as much as I was hoping to, and like I said, I'm not quite sure I understand all the hype that's been around this book, and it's kind of one of those books where I've read it and I'm kind of like, what was I missing? Because yeah, it was a decent procedural, like police procedural thriller mystery. I knew the answer quite early on, but I still enjoyed it. Like I said, I've given it 3 out of 5, and that's my last read for Thrillathon now. I'm not planning on reading any other thrillers for the rest of the week. I've got other stuff that I want to read, but I have really, really enjoyed my Thrillathon experience this time around, so I'm looking forward to the summer edition. And yeah, this was okay. It's the 22nd of February and it's a Saturday, but the boys have gone swimming, so I thought I would take advantage of the quiet house to talk about 2 very different books that I finished over the last couple of days. So the first one was Come Tumbling Down by Seanan McGuire. It's book 5 in the Wayward Children series, and as I've done with all of the others, I read that audibly via Scribed, and it's book 5, so I can't like say too much about it because it would give definite spoilers for the other books. They are novellas, so they're super short. I think the audiobook for this was just over 3 hours. And I was really anticipating it because I've loved the others in the series, but this one, I didn't love it. And I think it's just because they're so short, like, it doesn't really feel like, by the time I got to the end of this book, like, not a lot had happened, and it doesn't really feel like we're getting very deep into these stories anymore. I've still given it a 3 out of 5. The audiobook was great. As always with these books, there's some really, a wide, like, berth of, that's the cat jumping down. Yeah, like a wide range of people and representation and all that kind of stuff. So that's really great, and I love that element of it, and I love the way things are described, and I love the things that she's talking about, but I just got a little bit bored, and I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, wasn't my favourite read of the month. But then I have read a 5-star read for the month, which was also my classic, which was The Railway Children by E. Nesbit. And oh man, I think one of my favourite classics from last year was Goodnight Mr. Tom, and this is sort of in a very similar feel to that one. This was published in 1906 and it has never been out of print, which is just an incredible achievement. And basically we're following 3 siblings, Bobby, Peter and Phyllis. Bobby is a girl, her full name is Roberta, and basically one night they live in London with their parents. They're very wealthy, they've got servants and all that kind of stuff. One night their father is taken away, and a week or so later their mother tells them that they now have to move to the country, and they end up living in this tiny cottage. Their mother is writing stories for money, and the kids are sort of left to their own devices, and they become obsessed, is that really the word? They basically make friends with the people that run the railway and the villagers, and it's kind of about what happens to them, and it's this fairly gentle, just lovely story, but it's got some really interesting kind of morals and things that are underpinning it. It's for a book that's written in 1909 or published in 1906, sorry. It's got some real feminist stuff in it as well. There's a section where Peter is taken aside by the male doctor and basically is told that he has to be nice to his sisters because as they are females, they are, you know, weaker and gentler and need to be kind of looked after like any good man should. Peter then goes home to his sisters and repeats this to them, and their response is hilariously outraged, and they basically teach him a lesson and remove that thought from his head. So yeah, I absolutely adored this and give it 5 stars. If you're looking for kind of a cozy, easy, gentle read, I would really highly recommend this, and I think it's probably it's tied in first place with Goodnight Mr. Tom for my favourite children's classic. It's just glorious. And also I've got it in this lovely edition, which let's try and get it without the glare. So yes, this soft pink colour, and it's just lovely, and it's got this really nice bright blue end pages. So yeah, that was an absolutely wonderful reading experience. It's the 24th of February, as you can see. I'm ready to go to work, but I've got 2 books to talk to you about. So on Saturday I started and completed a book which I haven't done for a little while. Basically I needed a book for a bookish project that you guys will be seeing all about in a few months time, later in the year. And so I've been looking for a book for that project, and I finally found one. That book is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. First of all, how lovely is this cover? It's just, there's just something really nice about it when you hold it. It's very pleasing. It's a book that I think came out last year. I saw it all over Booktube, particularly during Mental Health Fun in May, and I finally got around to picking it up. My history with John Green is I've read all of his books. I went through a phase when I was doing my master's degree of basically picking up everything he'd ever written. So I've read Looking for Alaska, I've read An Abundance of Catherines, I have read The Fault in Our Stars, Will Grayson. I think that's probably all the ones that I've read, but I've not picked one up for years, and because I kind of did that thing where I binged, I kind of got bored of his writing style, so I was a little bit hesitant going into this, but I absolutely loved it, and I've given it 5 stars, and I literally couldn't put it down. It's fairly short, it's 200 and something pages. How long are you? Yeah, 286 pages, so it's not a big book, but it made me feel things. So we're following a girl who has mental health issues. She never says what her diagnosis is, but she has a fear of germs and infection, and she has really invasive thoughts, and she has panic attacks, and that's something that John Green struggles with, so it's own voices. And it's basically her and her friend trying to work out where another friend's father has disappeared to, and sort of along the way she meets a boy, and it's just this YA mental health book, and I feel like it was done really, really well. There are a couple of passages where she has panic attacks, and I had to actually skim read them because it was so close to the bone and so well described that I kind of almost felt like it was gonna trigger me. So just be aware of that. However, I absolutely loved how this was done. Slight spoiler, I guess, but one of the things I loved about it so much is we don't have that really damaging trope of boy meets girl, boy cures girl of mental illness, and everyone is happy ever after. That doesn't happen, which is something that John Green's been criticised for in the past, and I'm really glad that he didn't do it in this. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. You'll be seeing more about this book on my channel soon, not really that soon, later in the year. And yeah, 5 stars from me. And then on Sunday, so yesterday, I got an Amazon delivery from a friend, and it's one of those things where Gary's like, oh, you've had an Amazon delivery, and it's like, well, I didn't order anything, so it must be a present, and it was. And it was this, which is Soulmates by Holly Vaughan, which is Holly Vaughan's debut. It's massive, it is such a brick. And how big are you? 550 pages, which is pretty big, but it's Holly Vaughan, and I've been trying to read all of her books this year. I've now only got one left that I don't own. I've got 2 others apart from this one upstairs on my TBR shelf. One is going to be on my March TBR. Obviously this will add to it, and then I've only got 1 left to collect, and then I've got a whole set, and I'm definitely going to be reading them in the next sort of 6 months. So yeah, this is her debut. It just says on the back, soulmates do exist, but not as you think, and that's as much as I've read really. And then here it says a love story to end the world, so I'm really intrigued to see what it is. And yeah, read the original Holly Vaughan book. But this was a present from my friend Daniela from Daniela Nina Reeds, who I will link in the description. I think she's Czech, I hope I'm right in saying that, and I really like her content, her channel. She's got this kind of quite quiet, relaxed kind of thing, the usual style of booktuber that I enjoy, and she just sent this really nice note, said, "Hi Victoria, I hope this will brighten your day because your content and your support often brightens my days," and that's just like, that brightened my day. So yeah, that was a really lovely surprise, so thank you Daniela, and you didn't have to do that, but you definitely made my day. And usually I would have filmed me opening it, but it was Sunday and I looked like an egg and the boys were here and I didn't feel like filming, so I thought I would squeeze that in now. So yes, thank you very much. It's been a very good weekend. It's the 26th of February and I'm sorry if I sound weird. I have got my first cold of the year, which is making me a little bit croaky. But last night I finally finished a book that I've been reading for weeks. There goes the cat. You'll have seen me start this book during 1,000 Pages Readathon. I will put the blog for that up there. And usually if it took me this long to read a book, I would have DNF'd it ages ago. But this is a series of books I've talked about quite a bit on this channel, and I do deliberately read them slowly. They are quite big books and I just don't want to rush them. So that book is Lamentation by C.L. Sansom. I think you can see, yeah, I can see the rest of the series there. This is book 6. It's big. It's 737 pages, I think. Yeah. So it's slightly smaller than Heartstone, which was the predecessor, although not as big as, I think it's called Tombaland or Tombland maybe or something, which is the next one, which I think is like 900 pages. Anyway, this is a Tudor murder mystery series, detective series, in which we follow Matthew Shardlake. He is a lawyer. The first book, Dissolution, starts with the beheading of Anne Boleyn, and then in this book we are following Catherine Parr, and well, not following Catherine Parr, but it's at the time that Catherine Parr is queen, and it's towards the end of Henry's reign, leading up to his death. What I really like, and I've said this before, what I really like about these is it is not following Henry and his wives and that story. It's very much about the society that was around at the time, how people thought about things. Matthew is dragged into like politics and various mysteries that he needs to solve, and it's very much around him, the people in his life, and it's not centred around the court. However, this book very much is centred around the court because, as you might have guessed from the title of the book, it's around the book that Catherine Parr wrote, Lamentations of a Sinner. And basically, in this, that book has been stolen and Matthew's desperately trying to get it back to save the Queen from being arrested for heresy and potentially killed by her husband. And I just thought this was fantastic. It is so intricately woven. We've got subplots, we've got stuff from previous books, we've got new characters in this one, we've got old characters that we're still following. I just absolutely adored it, and I definitely savour these books. They're not ones that I rush through. I could, because the pacing is really good, but they are big and like the text is small. But I just, yeah, I can't recommend this series enough. I know it's not going to be for everyone. Not everybody wants to read big historical mystery thrillers, but I think the writing's fantastic. I thoroughly enjoy them, and I'm excited to get on to the next one. I think I've said before that I thought the next one was the last one, but I was talking to my brother about it because he's a massive fan as well. This is how I got onto this series, is he sent me the first book in 2018 and said, read this, and eventually I did, and he was right. And he was saying that he didn't think that the next one is the last one, and actually had a bit of a dig about on GoodReads and Wikipedia, obviously both excellent sources of information. And it does say that another book is coming in this series, but who knows when that'll be. So I've got one more published book to read, and then I'll have to wait for him to write any more. So I probably won't read the next one straight away because I don't want to rush it. Although we are now getting into a bit of history that I find really interesting, which is the bit after Henry VIII. But this one I gave 5 stars. It's a solid 5 stars for me. I think it's only this one and Heartstone, which is the predecessor, that I've given 5 stars to. But I just love the story so much and the writing, and I just can't give any less than 5 stars. So yeah, I would recommend these. Like I said, I know it's not for everyone, but I had a fantastic time. It's the 28th of February. I am about to go to work, although I don't think if you can see, it's currently snowing, which is not ideal and it needs to go away. Yeah, it's only like lightly snowing and it's wet, so hopefully it won't stick. Anyway, last night I finished Last Night in Montreal by Emily St. John Mandel, which was kindly lent to me by my friend Amy. I read and loved Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I think it was 2018 before I started Booktube. And so when I saw that Amy had read this, I sent her a message. I was like, oh, can I borrow that? Because we swap books quite a bit. And she was kind enough to lend it to me. I think this was Emily St. John Mandel's debut. And it's kind of weird. It's very literary fiction. It actually really reminds me of Margaret Atwood's style of writing. And even though it's really short, it's like 230 pages, it's taken me about 10 days to read. And it's also kind of difficult to explain. We're following a girl who was abducted by her father as a child, and he kept her moving around her whole life. So she's kind of grown up on the road, moving from place to place, motel to motel. And that's kind of all I can tell you about the story. It's also quite a difficult one to review because I really loved the writing. The writing's beautiful, and there were sections of it where I flew through it, but then there were other sections where I was bored and I was almost skipping bits. It's quite reflective, it's slow, like I said. It does definitely remind me of early Margaret Atwood's. So if you've read Edible Woman, it kind of gave me that sort of vibe. So yeah, I've given it 3 out of 5. I'm glad I've read it. I love this cover, which also matches the cover for Station 11. And I just think they're fab. And thanks for lending it to me, Amy. I didn't love it, but I did enjoy it, and I'm glad I've read it.
It's the 28th of February. It's very rainy and grim, but I have just finished The Accident by C.L.Taylor, which I thoroughly enjoyed. The only book by her that I've read up to that point was Sleep, which I read as part of Thrillathon last August, because it was Nicole's host pick. So I was looking for a kind of easy listen for the end of the month, and something that I could kind of finish by the end of the month as well. And I saw that I think all of C.L.Taylor's books are on Scribe, so I just picked The Accident. I think it's her debut, just picked that at random, and have been reading it over the last few days. And yeah, like I said, I've really enjoyed it. It basically follows a woman whose daughter is in a coma following an accident, but we don't know. Basically, her daughter was hit by a bus, and we don't know if her daughter walked out in front of the bus on purpose or if it was an accident. And then we're also following the same woman 20 years earlier in a relationship with a guy called James, and what happened to her there. Now, I need to give heavy trigger warnings for gaslighting, domestic abuse and rape, so just be aware of that going in. For me, I am someone who unfortunately has been in a couple of relationships actually, where I was gaslit. Thankfully not anymore. But if you've been in that position, then I would just go carefully with this book, because for me, it's because the writing is so good. It was very, very vivid, so just be aware of that. I've given it 4 stars. I couldn't give it 5. The pace, as often happens I think with thrillers, especially debut thrillers, is the pace is a little bit baggy, and I didn't love, it's got the trope of somewhat of a character who's not believed because they've had a mental illness or have a mental illness, and I find that quite frustrating. I can see why it's done from a writer point of view, because it does create that unreliable narrator thing, but it is feels a little bit problematic sometimes, and it did teeter on the edge of that in this book. Also, I didn't love the end. I mean, I did love the end. I didn't love the way that the end was done, but given that this was their debut, I'm pretty sure it was, so I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this was her debut, and given that, I think it's a really good thriller. It's a solid book, domestic drama type situation, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Really liked the audiobook, really liked the narrator, and I liked it enough I've just picked up The Lie, which I think is the next one by C.L.Taylor. I think it's the next book, and I've literally just started listening to that straight after I finished The Accident. So yeah, successful read.
And those were all the books I read in February. I've had such a good reading month because I read 15 books, which is basically a book every other day, because there's only 29 days in February this year. And yeah, it's been a really good month. I feel like I've definitely got back into my reading groove this month. I've really enjoyed reading again. January was just such a slog. I mean, I read I think like 10 or 11 books, but it just felt like such an effort. This month, again, like I've gone back to that like feeling of just effortlessly reading, which is really nice. So yeah, it's been a good month for reading. In general, it's also been a good month. I've got some big life changes coming. I'm not pregnant before anybody starts on that, which I won't be able to talk about just yet, but I will be boring you all senses with it soon enough, I'm sure. But that is something that's been on my mind and on the cards for quite a while, and has been taking a lot of my time and energy, and it's finally all come together, so that's really exciting, and that I think has helped me feel better in myself because I now know the shape of things to come. So yeah, that's been a good thing as well. So the books, as I said, I read 15, which totaled 5,024 pages, which is a lot, although I did read Lamentation, which is a beast. Averages at 174 pages a day, which is great. In terms of star rating, my average was actually 3.75, which is a lot lower than I thought it would be, but I've still thoroughly enjoyed my month. In terms of my favourite book of the month, I'm actually really struggling because all 4 of these got 5 stars, and I love them all for very different reasons. Like this one, Alibi Girl by C.J. Skuse. I haven't read and basically devoured a book so quickly for ages, and I really liked it. I really liked how different it is from Sweet Pea. This has got a lot more heart to it, and actually it surprised me with how emotional it made me feel. And then The Railway Children, oh, this is definitely up there with all my favourite classics. This is just wonderful, and also a bit like Alibi Girl in that they're 2 completely different books. It was unexpected because it had, for a book that was written in 1906, I think, published in 1906, it had some really strong feminist themes in it, which I wasn't expecting and really enjoyed, so that was that one. And then I also read Turtles All the Way Down by John Green, which, as I've said, is for a project which you'll be hearing about shortly. And this I loved, and I've not loved a John Green book for a long time, but this felt very honest and very raw, and again made me feel things. And then finally I gave this huge beast, Lamentation by J Sansom, 5 stars, because for such a huge book I felt like I wouldn't have taken anything out, which is really tough to do, and it shows the skill of the writing. And as we all know, I thoroughly enjoy the series. The sisters are up there. Once I finish this filming this clip, I'm going to put all my books away and it will go up there with its sisters. So yeah, it's really tough to try and choose a favourite book when you've been lucky enough to read that many 5-star reads, but I think I'm going to go with Alibi Girl by C.J. Skuse. I just loved it, and I'm going to reread it because it's one of those books I read it so fast the first time I feel like I really need to go back when I'm a bit calmer about it and reread, so I will definitely be rereading it. And yeah, I think this will be my favourite book of the month. So there we go, that's all my books I read in February. Leave me a comment down below in the comment section with your favourite book of February. How's your reading month been? Of these books, have you read any of these? What did you think? Let's have a little chat in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks guys, bye!